Hi, I'm Bersercules, the Berserk Herc. And as none of you know, because I never told you before, I love old Superman comic books from the early 60s. So I'm going to start reviewing stories from the old issues. And in the old Superman comics, each issue has either 2 or 3 smaller stories in it, and I'll focus on one story per review, because I have a lot to say about each one. But first, for those of you who don't know, Superman in the 60s was a bizarre time. If you've seen the Batman TV show from the 60s, which I've reviewed, or the Spider-Man animated TV show from the 60s, which I've also reviewed, or the Submariner cartoon from the 60s, which again I've also reviewed, then you know the 60s were a crazy, messed up time. But none of those shows were as weird and amazingly odd or bizarre as the Superman comic book from the 60s. Batman in the 60s fought crazy villains, each with crazy costume and crazy plans, and Batman fought them with crazy contraptions. Spider-Man in the 60s fought crazy villains and went crazy places, and Submariner lived under the sea with a bunch of Atlanteans that forgot they could swim in water. But Superman? He's weird for totally different reasons. And some of the same reasons. Superman fights crazy odd villains. Everything from a giant gorilla that shoots lasers out of its eyes, a fifth-dimensional being that causes trouble and pulls pranks, and won't go home until someone tricks him into saying his confusing name backwards, giant fire-breathing dragons, super smart robots, bald scientists, and a metal man that looks exactly like Superman, but has a mustache. A villain that looks exactly like yourself, but with facial hair? That's just silly. I know, eh? And he goes weird places like alien worlds, Atlantean worlds, or even back in time to the dinosaur days. And he has a weird base, his Fortress of Solitude, which he keeps alien technologies, ancient ruins, space creatures in cages that he practices wrestling with, whole cities and bottles complete with thousands of miniature inhabitants, and statues of all his friends going as far as showing off their secret identities. You know, just in case intruders want to know who Batman and Robin really are. But mostly, the Superman comics are weird for all the interplay in the characters. Superman is Clark Kent, and he hides his dual identity from Lois Lane, his co-worker, who gets in a lot of trouble, catches crooks, and who loves Superman, but doesn't love Clark, who she off and on thinks is Superman. But even when she thinks Clark is Superman, doesn't act interested in Clark, like she does in Superman. And then there's Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal and friend of Clark Kent, who works with him and Lois Lane, and who has a signal watch that can call Superman in an instant, and who has a thing for Lois Lane's sister, Lucy Lane, who won't give Jimmy the time of day. And Jimmy often catches crooks with crazy costumes and weird aliases, like Phantom Fingers, Master Pickpocket, Julie Ogden, Chorus Girl, or Dick Hunter, Elevator Boy. What? Dick Hunter? Jimmy Olsen uses the alias Dick Hunter? What the fuck? What kind of name is Dick Hunter? Is Jimmy Olsen secretly gay? Or was the writer of this comic secretly gay, and he named that character that as a subtle hint to all those in the know? Jeepers! Why not just call him Johnson Stalker, or Penis Lover? There's also Lana Lang, a girl that used to go after Superman when he was a boy in Smallville called Superboy. And just like Lois, she goes after Superman now as an adult. And then there's Lori Lamars, a mermaid who Clark Superman Kent once fell in love with, who is now married to another merperson, but is still friends with Superman. Is a married mermaid still a maid, or a mermissus? Anyway. And then there's Superman's cousin, Linda Lee, aka Supergirl, who was from a chunk of Superman's homeworld, Krypton, that broke off the planet prior to Krypton's exploding, and traveled through space till it blew up, leaving Supergirl to be jettisoned in a rocket from the chunk of Krypton prior to its explosion, just like Superman was. Wow! Kryptonians can't catch a break! Oh, and all the women in Superman's life have the initials LL, which brings us to Lex Luthor, Superman's arch-villain, who is often suspected as a girl pretending to be a bald man who actually wants Superman sexually. But anyway. The Superman comics often revolve around Superman, and a few of these characters, as Superman juggles saving lives and hiding his secret identity, or saving lives and dodging marriage schemes, as Lois is desperate for marriage. And Superman won't marry Lois because he doesn't want criminals to target her because she's his wife. But that doesn't mean they don't target Lois all the time anyway, for being Superman's girlfriend and a nosy reporter. And Superman also won't marry Lois because he doesn't have time for a wife, but spends countless hours hiding his identity from Lois, saving her life, and dodging her marriage proposals. And Lois wants to marry Superman, but not Clark Kent, who she often thinks is Superman. Sure, I mentioned that bit twice, but that's nothing compared to how often it comes up in the stories. And when Superman hides his secret identity, it's often with the help of his Superman robots. Yeah, Superman has Superman robots. He uses them to help him hide his secret identity or protect him from kryptonite. I wish I had helpful robots. My Bersercules robot is just lame. I am Bersercules robot. Bring me food and buy me comic books. Also, he often gets others to help him with hiding his secret identity, like Supergirl, Batman, or even Aquaman. 'Cause I'm sure those superheroes have nothing better to do than to spend their afternoons helping save Superman's secret identity, which he doesn't even need. Super priorities! There's also a lot of stories involving kryptonite hurting Superman, or in the case of red kryptonite, affecting Superman in weird and crazy ways, like not allowing him to turn off his X-ray vision, or having him hallucinate to the point he's a danger to everyone, or even terrible things, like making his hair and nails grow long. Oh no! The horror! And then there are some imaginary tales. Wait a second. Aren't all these stories imaginary? Or am I missing something? Anyway, and then there are some imaginary tales that show what would happen if Superman and Lois got married. Some going as far as forgetting the characters' interrelationships and being quite disturbing. My favorite being Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 56, which has a cover advertising for a story in the comic, which includes Superman and Lois' daughter kissing Jimmy and Lucy's son. Think about it. Superman is married to Lois Lane, and they have a daughter. Jimmy Olsen is married to Lucy Lane, and they have a son. And they get together and kiss. Lois Lane is her mother. Lucy Lane is his mother. They're sisters, which makes these two first cousins making out on the cover of a comic book. Now that's just fucked up. Oh, and in this issue, they also get married! Yee-haw! So there you have it. Just the tip of the iceberg as to why the Superman comic books in the 1960s were very weird and bizarre. The rest of my proof? Well, you'll have to see it in my upcoming reviews. So that's it. It's now the end.